Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar, Improve Your OT Cybersecurity Awareness Program with this one cool trick. And although it sounds like clickbait, it is actually a real thing. We have some great ideas, one in particular that can help you with your OT Cybersecurity Awareness Program. I am Carrie Tomlinson with Archer News, and this webinar is bringing you experts from Archer and from KnowBe4. We are so glad to have you join us for this. Please ask questions at any time throughout this webinar. Feel free. We will take questions as they come, or you can save your questions until the end. We will have time at the end to ask questions. And what we want to do is really help you with your OT Cybersecurity Awareness Program. We want to hear about what kind of difficulties you may be having and how we can help you solve them. And of course, you are excited to hear what is that one cool trick. It's not just clickbait, although it's a great title. And we hope that you came to hear our ideas. I'm going to introduce myself. I am Carrie Tomlinson. I am editor-in-chief of Archer News. I was a TV news reporter for 30 years, won multiple Emmy Awards, investigative news reporter, and I retired from TV news after 30 years to do cybersecurity news. And what I do is translate what is going on in the world of cybersecurity for the so-called average person, the person who's not necessarily technical. And this is actually, it works out great for cybersecurity awareness. People actually play the Archer News videos for cybersecurity awareness in their companies because it brings it down to a place where everyone can understand it. And on top of that, a special bonus, I have been trained and certified. I'm a trained and certified SSAP, SANS Security Awareness Professional. So I actually can help people with their awareness programs. And that is the goal of my videos, is to actually help people create effective cybersecurity awareness programs. And now our next speaker, James, will talk about himself a bit. Actually, Patrick, how about Patrick?
All right, I'll go next. Thanks, Carrie. Looking forward to this conversation with the both of you. I'm a former telecom, water, and multiple electric utility staffer. I've been through the ranks of several industrial spaces. One of the original drafters of the NERC SIP standards, for those of you that are in the electric regulatory space. I was also the first NERC SIP auditor in the nation. I get that dubious title as well. I was the founder and former CEO. Now I'm just on the board of directors for Energy Sec. Stood up one of the DOE cybersecurity projects as well as principal investigator, US coordinator for the Industrial Cybersecurity Center out of Madrid in Spain. And I'm also a managing partner here at Archer as a consultant, and we're doing a lot of great work in the industrial space. I do a lot of speaking and a lot of engagements for industrial security around the globe, and a whole bunch of letters as well. Apparently I test well on certificates. James.
Great. Thank you very much, Patrick, and to Carrie, and to everybody at Archer for having me along here today to talk about security awareness, which is, I'd say, a passion of mine. It's something I really do enjoy getting up every morning and really wanting to talk to people about it, whether it's parents, whether it's kids, whether it's security professionals, or people that work in power plants and manufacturing and water treatment facilities. So just after 18 years, I started of another company. I started at KnowBe4 back in October. KnowBe4 is does security awareness training, and they do phishing assessments. My particular role as security awareness advocate is essentially go around and promote and advocate for security awareness. So working with Carrie and helping out Patrick here today. But yeah, for 18 years, I worked for a little German company called Siemens, where I was involved in a variety of different roles dealing with security awareness. Did that for about 5 years from a corporate level in our energy department or division. And, but then also was a product security officer in our wind division, and then came up in the ranks in the knots in the 2000s in our monitoring group, where basically did everything from building systems, monitoring systems, network security, VPNs, and that led me into NERC SIP, and then I met Patrick, and the rest is history. So again, real excited to be here, looking forward for a great conversation as well. Back to you, Carrie.
All right, well, let's take a look at the main question at hand here. And that is, what is the difference between IT and OT when it comes to security awareness? So how is security awareness for OT different from security awareness for IT? And we'd like to hear where you guys are coming from, why you're here, and what you want to learn. But we're going to look at this. And why don't we start with Patrick? Talk about what is OT and what is IT and how are they different? And then we'll hear from James as well.
Sure. Most people know what the term IT means, information technology. It's your standard, email servers, HR systems, customer information systems, website, all that stuff. OT is the operational technologies, sometimes called ICS or industrial control systems. They effectively mean the same thing, but the operational technologies they can have some of those standard, Windows and Unix and database world. But a lot of it is purpose-built. I don't want to call them dumb devices, but they're designed to do one thing and only one thing in a lot of cases. Sometimes they have things like a real-time operating system. And basically, some of them run just on firmware and some ladder logic, for example. These are things like programmable logic controllers, RTUs, this kind of stuff. There are different types of technology. I would argue, and I've said this before, they're getting closer together because what used to be traditional OT is looking more and more like IT going forward. Eventually, it's going to look like T. But the reality is there's still very different mindsets in how these two kind of worlds manage their stuff, manage their technology. From an awareness perspective, security awareness in particular, both of these worlds need security awareness. And James and I have talked at length about what's the value of security and awareness, and I'll let him. He's got a much better story to tell about this than I do. But I would say for me the primary difference between the two, a lot of folks would focus on that it's the content. You have to have a lot of specific content that goes to one side or the other. Reality is you can almost use the same content or even repurpose content in both worlds. Whatever gets them motivated is what matters, and you'd be surprised what motivates people motivates people. I think a lot of it has to do with the delivery. It's the way the message is conveyed, can be in the setting, just how you get to them with that same content, for example, I think is the biggest difference.
Yeah, exactly. And coming out of the OT space, whether it was control room operators or working out in the plant or on the manufacturing floor, water treatment plants or wherever, for them, it's all about, we all know it's all about availability, and they got to keep the systems running. But awareness comes, for me, whether you're in IT or in OT, it's going to be different because in OT, yeah, as Patrick said, you've got all the different systems, but we kind of almost have to take a step back, and the awareness now becomes on that OT perspective on the developer platform. The organizations that are developing the equipment, those PLCs, those single devices or single-use devices that are out there, we want to make sure that the organizations that are providing that equipment as well has security awareness for the developers, so that there's that awareness of making sure that the coding is being done right, or that they're not putting, it's a cheesy example, but you're not putting telnet back into these systems, that you are coming up with secure models for the products. So it's going all the way back, but then when you bring it into the plant environment, that where you have people that are working, they're working to make sure that the plant is operational, the widgets are getting made, the whatever. They'll sit there and go, I don't have time to sit here and do a 10 to 30 minute training session or go to the break room and listen to a PowerPoint from the security guy that comes in that doesn't know what we do. So it has, for the awareness standpoint, it's got to be something that is engaging for them, that they can relate to, because if there's no buy-in from the employees, then it's not going to work. You're going to basically just be running into a brick wall every single time, even if you do have a great
So
tool.
I think it's really important to note that the mindset is very different for OT versus IT. And I'll just give a quick example from TV news. So as a TV news reporter, there is no time. There is no time to eat. There is no time to drink. There is no time to go to the bathroom. You are in a race. And however, there are multiple people at a television station who do all number of jobs. There's sales and HR. So our company would send out a 30-minute meditation exercise that everyone was supposed to do to reduce stress. Now, for a TV news reporter, that only increases stress because you do not have half an hour. And if you had half an hour, you needed to go to the bathroom and have some food. However, in HR, half an hour is great, and they took it and they were much less stressed. So you want to approach things in that sort of mindset that one size fits all doesn't work, and something that works for you. Maybe you're a security awareness person who has more time and you get to take a lunch. Maybe you get to take a lunch. That's wonderful. So for you, the concept of doing a half-hour training or an hour-long training, that's a different idea than someone who has a mindset of, I've got to keep the lights on. I've got to keep this thing moving no matter what. That is my job.
Yeah.
So let's look at some examples as why we have this mindset, why we get to this mindset in OT. And we're going to look at IT versus OT when it comes to phishing. We're going to look at some real world examples of that. So IT versus OT, some phishing cases so we can see the mindset. The first one we're going to look at in IT is a phishing case involving a bank on the Isle of Man. That is the Isle of Man right there. Small island. Yes, it looks like that. It feels like that. This is Cayman National Bank. And in 2016, they were phished. Someone sent them an email from a domain that was very similar to the Cayman National Domain. They got in, and the thief ended up stealing several $100,000, which really for a bank is not all that bad. You've heard of the transactions where more than $80 million were stolen from banks. So banks don't like this. This is bad. The bagpiper played some sad songs for the bank and problematic. They lost money. Let's look at the next case for that when we're looking at IT versus OT, and that is the Nintendo hack in 2016, also 2016. A young man, a teenager, used phishing to hack into Nintendo and was able to steal information about the new Nintendo Switch that was coming out at that time. You may remember that. And he released that information. He created Ryan's Hangout. He was a star on Twitter and on Discord and was able to share this information. And Nintendo worked to find him. They found him. They asked him to stop. He did it again in 2018 and 19. He was caught again. And he released lots of proprietary information about their games. And of course, this equals money for them. And a third example of a phishing attack was on the Shark Tank host, Barbara Corcoran. And she lost about $400,000. She ended up getting the money back, but that was phishing, where they sent her bookkeeper an email that looked like it was from the accountant saying, pay this invoice, and she paid the money. Now, what you may see is that Barbara had a very cavalier attitude about what happened. She was like, oh, I was upset about this, but then I remembered that it was only money. So let's look at a case of phishing in the OT world. In the OT world, it's not only money. Now, also for many real people, it's not only money. But in the OT world, it is certainly a lot more than money. And this particular case that we're looking at in the OT world is a phishing attack on a gas pipeline company, a natural gas pipeline company. Happened at the end of last year. And the company itself has not been named by DHS or by the Coast Guard. But someone opened a phishing email, and Ryuk ransomware was launched on the system. And what we are told by the Coast Guard about this is it definitely affected IT systems, but it also affected OT systems.
Yeah.
Not so much that it actually shut down the system, but it shut down visibility for the system. And they were not able to see and control things in a way that they were used to. And as a result, they decided they had to shut down the pipeline for 2 days, approximately 2 days, until they could bring in, what they said is they had to bring in new equipment to make this work. So the difference between, oh, I lost $400,000 and, oh, we're shutting down a natural gas pipeline for about 2 days is huge. And we spoke to some experts. I actually did a story on the natural gas pipeline incident, and I spoke to experts, and they said that the attackers could have done far more if they had been aware. They were really only after the money, but they could have done far more. Not some crazy incident like blow up the world, but they could have done some damage. And of course, when you think about doing damage in industrial environments, you realize that lives are at stake. So it's not just reliability, it's not just keeping the lights on, keeping the natural gas flowing, keeping the world going, which is the mission of OT people, but it is also saving lives. So I'd like Patrick and James to talk a little bit more about what is the most successful way to reach people who have this mindset and talk to them about security awareness for cybersecurity.
Yeah, let me jump in first if I can. I think what you mentioned there in terms of the differences in impact is probably the greatest differentiator between the two groups. If the email system goes down, that's a problem. A lot of people get pretty upset. Business can actually grind to a halt in a lot of ways. If your internet network connection, for example, goes down, that's a problem. Everything from business partners to transactions, all kinds of things go bad. Everything HR systems, customer information systems, even your website, gets defaced. That's a problem. In almost all cases, those things translate into dollars. In a very few instances, it can translate into lost jobs. But when you have the industrial impacts, you've got everything from, thousands, if not millions of dollars in lost product. And you've got machine replacement time, enormous amounts of labor. In a lot of the industrial spaces, you may even have things like work stoppage because of the time needed in overtime for union workers. I mean, all of these impacts are much bigger from a dollars and cents perspective on the industrial side than the traditional IT side. But, not the least of which is it scales beyond these, frankly, massive financial impacts all the way out to the loss of life. I mean, you can have things like, frankly, if you were to attack a chemical plant or a natural gas facility, you could make things go boom or leak, nasty chemicals and kill anywhere from one to many people. So, that sliding scale of, okay, there's lots of money at stake and you ruin a big giant piece of multi-million-dollar machinery, for example, that's a problem. But when you kill people, that's a really big problem. So the difference typically with the OT world is it's a lot more engineering focused than it is traditionally technology focused. And in their world, it's a very physics, Mother Nature kind of mindset. They need a lot of examples when you're trying to communicate messages to them. So there's a lot, just the way the message goes across differently, even with the same, like I say, with the same content, just conveying in a different way. But I think the biggest difference is I think back to the show, The IT Crowd, they always answer the phone with, have you tried turning it off and back on again? That's kind of the traditional IT mentality, and not to, make fun of any IT people, but it's a different way of thinking, because in the OT world, you can never turn it off. It cannot be turned off. That is the mindset. It must stay on all the time. And there is no possibility that it gets turned off. In fact, you will let something run without patches for many years because you don't want to turn it off. So the difference there, I think, in that mindset is absolutely key. There's a lot of, because of that impact, I think there's an immediate distrust of change, of introduction of any new practice, because this is the way we've done it. We know this way works. If we have to make any changes, you really have to justify why we need to do this, because, you know, we could kill people if we do things wrong. And it's not just because, you know, they're the party of no, right? They don't want to stop all good things from happening. It's because there is some very severe impact to the changes that may happen in their world, even if it is just a procedural change, just a you know, standard practice in terms of how you do something, not the technology that you're using, but just the way you do things can even impact them. So I would say, you know, to answer your question specifically, it is really how you deliver the message that gets to them, that reaches them in their words, in their way.
Exactly. And, you know, it's interesting with what's going on in the world right now with regards to the pandemic, the healthcare workers. We have been seeing a lot of, and when I say me, I see, you know, in the world of security awareness, we're seeing a lot of, and there was an article today from the FBI regarding BEC, business email compromise, which is with what we saw what happened with Barbara. Granted, $400,000 to her is probably like, you know, could be 400 or $4,000 to the rest of us, but which I think is why she said it's only money, but I guess she can go make more. It's kind of hard if your oil and gas plant goes down, you can't, you know, can't push more oil through. You got to keep going. You got to start with where you left off. But the with the healthcare that we just saw, or saw the FBI warning this morning, there's a lot of scammers out there that are going after healthcare for PPE, for the equipment that's out there, donations and that kind of thing. And they're targeting them because they know that they are in a very high tense, high energy, anxiety environment. And so they're relying on that human nature of, hey, look, we've got all this equipment for you, you know, click on the link and go through this process or to order the equipment. You know, if you were to have that kind of an email that was sent to a control room operator or somebody that an operations engineer or a plant manager, you know, that said, hey, we've got a way to be able to increase performance for your gas turbine or your pipeline or your manufacturing equipment, you know, click on the link, you know, and if it was convincing and it looked like it came from a legit company, and they go ahead and click on that without really understanding phishing emails and the social engineering scams that go on, they would end up, you know, infecting, you know, dropping that Ryuk or Doppelpaymer or whatever ransomware into their system. Most likely the criminals that are doing this, for the most part, and you touched upon it already, Carrie, they weren't aware of what they've got. To them, it's a website address that they've found. It's a company. Hey, let's send an email. All right, let's pull out our energy template. This is the one we know gets through the technology, whether it's Office 365, whether you're using hardware, the blinky boxes on your email gateways to stop those phishing emails. The criminals out there have already tested the phishing emails that they're going to use to go through. And so they go, all right, this is an energy company. Let's take the energy template. Let's send it through. And, you know, like fishing on a lake, you know, you just need to catch one and you're going back the next day. And a lot of the time, that's what ends up playing here with these different organizations. And so they get in and they're either now they're evolving. You know, we almost say it's gone nuclear because the ransomware attacks, they're getting in, they're not just doing a hit and run of encrypting your data, making it unavailable, which in our environment, that's critical. They're stealing the data. It's a data breach. They're collecting the data, they're then turning around and ransoming not only the people in the organization, but then they're also going after customers or vendors or whoever else on top of that, looking to basically get the money. That's a lot of the time, that's what they're doing. There are some more specific groups that are out there now that are leaking the data or threatening to leak it. So in essence, they're holding the data ransom. So if intellectual property now from, you know, we'll take it from the industrial control system perspective, back from my days of working on NERC-CIP, you know, you've got all that intellectual property, that NERC-CIP, the BES info, you know, if that gets out, well, there's an incident response, CIP 08 gets triggered, you've lost data, and it gets released out there. That's, boy, I can't even begin to imagine what the fines would be like on that one. But without the awareness, you know, whether you've got that OT perspective and IT corporate environment, you want to make sure that the message is understandable for them. And if it's something where they can't dedicate 30 minutes or 45 minutes, or make it part of the culture. One of the big things that we're starting to see is trying to get security into the culture. I've known for years in the ICS space, OT environment, health and safety is pretty well the number one thing that everybody pays attention to. They have to do that health and safety briefing every day. Every time I visit a power plant, there's always a health and safety meeting that kicked off the whatever meeting that we're doing. Here are the exits. This is what you need to do, that kind of thing. And
Let me interrupt you there, James, so we can kind of focus this together for people, because what you're talking about is exactly the one cool trick. So let's focus on this. This is the one cool trick that you've all been waiting for. And that is with OT, as James was saying, the focus is on safety, and there's a long established culture of safety and a huge awareness of safety and a huge dedication towards safety, as in no injuries, saving lives, keeping physically safe. The one cool trick that you can do is attach cybersecurity awareness onto that and make safety encompass security as well, because for OT, security, cybersecurity is now a safety issue. It can now lead to physical damage. Cybersecurity attacks can lead to physical damage and physical bodies and lives being damaged or lost. So if you can bring cybersecurity awareness, cybersecurity into that safety culture, you will be attaching to the mindset that already exists, and it will resonate with OT people and they will understand it. So James, if you'd like to continue, you were talking about some great ideas of how to bring that into the safety culture that already exists.
So, looking at the best ways to communicate security, that's what we're talking about. When you're working in the control room or you're working on a manufacturing floor, there are daily briefings, right? And so that's kind of the way to start slipping in those little bits of nuggets of information, a different tip every day. I tried doing it at the last, back at Siemens. We would have daily briefings when I was in the wind division, and I would try to get, okay, once a week, give me 5 minutes and let me just talk about cybersecurity tips, just to kind of get it in there. Because the training aspect is essentially, training is where I feed you with a whole bunch of information and then you regurgitate it back, or I assess you on it by giving you a test. Awareness is behavioral. It's part of that mindset, the culture. And if you can get it into their behavior, my favorite example is, you walk to the end of the sidewalk, and now with everything going on, everybody's doing a lot of walking outside, but you get to the edge of the sidewalk, you look to the left, you look to the right, or if you're in Europe or in England, you look to the right, you look to the left. And why do you do that? You do that because you want to make sure that you don't get hit by any cars that are coming down the road. You're checking. And kind of the same thing applies there. If you can get that in their awareness, in their culture, then it's going to make things a lot easier with driving home that security awareness program.
Patrick, do you have some examples, some ideas of how to bring things into the security, into the safety culture?
Yeah, I like the idea or the example you used, James. How many of us as kids were running and then our parents were like, yelling at us from 50 yards away to stop and look both ways. And that has just been like baked into your brain, and it's inherent. I mean, anything that looks like it's a curb, you're going to stop it immediately. And you're not only looking with your eyes, but you're sensing with your ears, and you're using, even like your Jedi senses to make sure you're not going to get hit. But somehow that's just baked into you. Excellent example. But yeah, I can say I've been to hundreds of safety meetings. I mean, every plant I go into, every facility you go into, every substation you go into, it's just that's the culture, and that it hasn't always been that way. It's gotten that way over time, and it's gotten that way because we've had some mistakes that were very costly and cost lives in some cases. But now you can't move an inch anywhere in a plant or an industrial facility without seeing the marking on the floor, seeing the color of the pipes, seeing the PPE on everybody. It is just their world. That wasn't like a light switch. It took a while, and it took a lot of safety managers a long time to figure out how to get that message across and actually change the culture. They've done all that hard work for you. That message is already built. That pathway is already wide open, and it is a great way for them to receive that information. So it's not as though you should basically, take all of your security awareness content and just put a big safety sticker on the outside and shove it down the pipeline in a big dump truck size load. They don't like things in that way. It's got to be bite-sized pieces that they can get in a safety meeting, in a tailboard session, even little things like a simple phrase in the break room on the poster on the wall that's got something catchy that looks like things that they're used to seeing, that kind of stuff. But it's basically the exact same messages, just packaged in a way that can get through to them through their most receptive channel, which is safety. Because it is part of everything that they do. And there's the question we've got, the best way to communicate awareness to OT. Use that safety vehicle.
Yeah, right. Let's look at some real world examples of what IT is currently using for security awareness. If we can go to the next slide, we can show you some of the really popular things. This is an escape room. Escape rooms are extremely popular right now in IT security awareness. I, as a certified SSAP, I am in constant contact with security awareness professionals all over the world. And escape rooms is one of the biggest things that everybody wants. Why? Because it's very engaging, it's very entertaining. You're playing with cybersecurity concepts. What is phishing? What does a phishing email look like? What should you do if you get ransomware? Very engaging and entertaining. However, not necessarily good for your OT folks. James or Patrick, would you like to shed a light on why?
Yeah, I think if you take a bunch of engineers and put them in a panic room, they're going to have a different discussion. Yeah, they'll try to do a lot of things other than get the security awareness message taken care of.
Why doesn't it work for them?
I think it's the engineering mindset. There's not some. They're wired to solve. They're wired to fix. They're wired to design. It's just a different world. And they will begin to tear apart the problem in the panic room to find the best example or best exit in a way that is probably less, I would say, less fun for all of the participants. I'll put it that way. Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to the next
cultural thing. Primarily.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's just a cultural thing primarily. Yeah.
All right, let's see the next example. All right, so this is another fun cybersecurity awareness game, Whodunit, where it's sort of like Clue, and you try to figure out who was the insider who stole the information. This is actually coming from the organization that provides cybersecurity awareness for the Department of Defense, and they do industrial as well. And this kind of thing, it's popular, it's fun. I played the game myself. I figured out who did it. I enjoyed it. And the idea from an IT security awareness perspective is that you play with the concepts and you're embroiled in the concepts and you're having fun and you're thinking about it and you're having a higher level of security awareness. And we can also look at the next slide after that one, which is a crossword puzzle, actually a word find, if you will, word find game, where you get to find some cybersecurity terms. Patrick or James, if you'd like to talk about why this is not ideal for OT folks.
They don't like fun and games? Come on, I thought,
They do like fun and games. They do. They do, but why is this not, this is not ideal?
Right, yeah. Patrick touched on it, when you're in the manufacturing environment, when you're at the power plants and those kind of facilities, you're dealing, granted, you're dealing with serious stuff, but I think that there has to be time for them to be able to digest it, whether it is posters in the break room or it's some type of, with security awareness, if you can make it engaging, where there's back and forth with it, then there is a little bit of, it has a tendency to stick a little more. I've always been a firm believer of when you have an emotional event, you know, kids are born, you get married, get divorced, kids go off to college, you hear a bad joke or a good joke. There's an emotional reaction that tends to go with that. And you remember what happens at that point in time. You know, when you're sending your kids off to college, you remember that day. So if there's an emotional attachment to it when you're learning about something, that kind of helps it as well. So whether, you know, there's some fun game or something that they enjoy doing. So, you know, whether it's a control room operator or somebody that was working on a plant floor, they're putting things together, they're watching for alerts, they're going through and doing some type of activity in a particular process. If you can make the awareness or the education part of it involved with that, where it's, so it may not be a search word, it could be you're putting something together that creates that, you know, it could, for example, you know, you've got the phishing emails coming in. Okay, well, we've got to figure out what stops need to be in place, and you have all the pieces and you got to put it together, and then boom, you solve it. Now you've learned what stops a phishing email. You know, there's those kind of things. If it's something process oriented, because that's how their mind works, that's what's going to help drive that home and make them remember along with it. You know, also, you know, if you want to teach them about ransomware, you just kind of say, how did the hackers get away from the police? They ransomware.
Oh, James, the dad jokes. No, all right, you got your one dad joke in.
Right, and I think James made a good point in that it's not that people who work in OT don't enjoy fun and games. And part of it is understanding your audience, and we will get to that a little bit later, but knowing what your particular OT group likes. But in general, you can expect them to be less delighted by find a word puzzles and more things that are a little bit more focused to what they need and what they want. So there is going to be some trial and error. Let's move on to the next slide. So we're going to look at some examples of how to successfully communicate OT security awareness. And if we can go to the next slide and take a look at one of the examples. So we were laughing about this slide. This slide is meant to represent an industrial break room. Raise your hand if you have seen an actual industrial break room, and it looks nothing like this. This is the fantasized version of it. But ideally, playing video in a break room is an excellent way to get information across to OT folks. And what I have found in my years of doing this is that providing information about real life, real world examples, you are providing information. You are not having them play games, you're having them learn information about what is really happening. And my theory is that when people learn the actual risks and learn that it is actually happening to other companies like your company, that is when it clicks for them, and that is when it becomes more real for them. With the Archer News videos that I do about real world news, that provides the actual aha moment of, oh, it is actually happening. It's not theoretical anymore. It's really happening, and it happened to someone who's like me in another industry, maybe a few states over. Patrick or James, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, I can add. In looking for images of industrial break rooms, there's nothing like that because no one wants to photograph an industrial break room. It's usually not the most awesome place. There's like that 1970s Bunn coffee maker in the back that's like 4 feet tall, and there's like 4 or 5 coffee pots scattered around with about half an inch of coffee in there, and it really smells like a truck stop. But in there's that place where there's in some cases now the bulletin board has been either augmented or replaced by a video wall or like a video screen. And it often has like a company message that gets played, and there's usually a safety message in there as always. Just adding some brief video content in there for them to understand. Even if they're not looking at it directly, they're gonna pay attention to it and they'll assimilate it just by it being in their environment. In the place that they're comfortable, in the place that they're used to seeing these kinds of messages. You're just, like I said, you're just using that safety kind of pathway to get things across to them. But yeah, I chuckled when we saw this one because there really wasn't any potential close image whatsoever that looked like an industrial break room. But that's where they hang out. In a lot of ways, if there was like a secondary path that was almost as successful as safety, it's with food. Because either donuts or coffee or kolaches if you're in the South. If you want to get through to some operators or some plant people, it's going to be like food and coffee, guaranteed. But if you can get the message across while they're having their food and coffee, it works. It works pretty good too. But yeah, I would agree that the break room is a great spot.
So I'm going to kind of take that notion there, Patrick, of the coffee and the donuts and everything else. And one of the things over the last several months that I've learned is, a lot of people do security awareness training with coffee and donuts in a PowerPoint presentation. So what I want to do is replace the coffee and donuts with, not necessarily coffee, we'll say sodas or water and popcorn. And instead of, on a weekly basis, you do, your a 10-minute video segment. One of the things that and I've seen other organizations, security training organizations do this as well. But one of the things, shameless plug coming up, spoiler alert. One of the things we did at KnowBe4 was we created a video series called The Inside Man. And it is more story, it's heavier on the story than it is on the actual education of security awareness. But it reinforces the idea of the security awareness concepts that you learn. So while everything is based for that in the IT, to have an OT one, wink, wink, hint, hint, Carrie Tomlinson, is to have like an OT video series that's focusing more on story than it is on the actual, the concepts, the training concepts. But you build those in and you make them like, a few minutes video segments so that people can get enough out of it. And then they realize and they recognize what those security concepts are that you're trying to pass along. That kind of helps, again, that reinforcement, that behavior aspect of it, rather than just here's a PowerPoint or here's the training and digest it. So.
All right, let's look at the next slide.
Your animated Lego series.
Yes, the animated Lego series. We will tell you how to access the animated Lego series. We have the Archer News Network YouTube channel, and you can use all of those videos for security awareness at your company. Many companies around the world do, industrial, non-industrial. They're quite popular. But this, as you see, looks like a safety meeting. Patrick, why don't you talk about why this is a great place to talk about cybersecurity as well as safety?
Yeah, as we talked about earlier, you're always going to have a safety meeting. It depends on if you're going to be walking in high spaces, if you're going to be in confined spaces, if you're going to be near anything that you could actually touch and cause issues, like if you're going to be able to touch a panel. You can't go behind the panels. There's all of these safety briefings that it's part of your day, it's part of your life. And in a single day, you may go through 5 or 10 safety briefings if you're walking into different areas of a plant or into multiple facilities. Since it is such a common place, there is always an opportunity to just insert a security message at the same time. Not like a 10-minute video, not even a couple of sentences or a paragraph, literally one brief sentence that says, for example, you'll see a lot of equipment in here. Make sure that you don't touch any of the equipment, obviously physically, but be mindful of the fact that, don't plug anything into any of these pieces of equipment as well. Something simple like that. That message every single time, they're going to hear that through the day 100 times through the month. And in their brain, they're going to think, oh, I shouldn't plug anything. Can I plug into this now? It's going to be part of their mindset. But little bits, little bite-sized pieces in every safety meeting add up over time to a much, much larger amount of security awareness.
And that also comes down to knowing your audience and knowing what are some of the cybersecurity issues for OT people. For example, it is very common for OT people to try to download videos or watch videos while at work.
Yeah.
That is a very, very common issue. So in a small safety meeting, you could bring up that security issue and you could talk about, for example, there was a beer making company, one of the largest beer making companies in the world, in the Czech Republic, where someone tried to download a movie, actually play it on a thumb drive, and it shut down the entire plant because of malware, I believe it was. It shut down the entire plant. Millions and millions of dollars lost. So you want to be aware of what are the issues that the OT people face. And this is a perfect place to bring it up and say, by the way, one of the biggest beer companies in the world shut down because someone plugged in a thumb drive to watch a movie. And then everyone looks around and goes, oh yeah, okay. And, leave your thumb drive at home.
So to piggyback off that, you have instances, and Patrick touched upon it with plugging things in. You're out working out in the plant area and your cell phone's dying. You just need to charge it. You see that USB port, and it's like, I'm just going to plug in. It's a USB port. I can charge it up, and I'll be good to go. But when they plug it in, and it's a Windows machine or a machine that's on part of that process network or whatever, and effectively, you now have a hotspot that you've now created and connected that system. There is that risk that you run. Data going either way, off your phone or whatever. So, the security tip there is just carry your portable battery charger with you so you don't have to plug into any devices.
Right. So for example, you could bring that up in the safety meeting. You could also have a video related to that runs in the break room, and maybe a poster related to that you have up in the break room, and you rotate through, focus on one message at a time, and then you're actually reaching OT people with the actual issues that affect them, as opposed to something that is just general for everybody, something they will actually pay attention to.
Or you even buy your own ones and you brand them with your logo with the message on it, and then they carry that around and it goes even further.
I've even seen in some cases they'll put actual charging stations out there that are power only, for example. The data pins have been removed from the charging stations. So those are going in, but having that part of the safety briefing saying, if you have a device that needs plugged in, that is only place you can plug it in, and it must go into there, that kind of thing. But that will help them reinforce the message of, I can't plug into just anything. I have to do it there.
Right. And remember to include real world stories of it really happening. You want that real world story, not just a theoretical where people have to change their behavior. Why are you telling me to change my behavior? Well, guess what? This happened to a natural gas pipeline company. This happened to a beer company, that kind of thing. Let's take a look at the next slide. And this is another opportunity. The training room. Patrick, if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, there's in a lot of cases, before you can do something new, you always have to go through some training, and it always involves safety training. It's just part of the industrial space. In there, just like you would in the break room or in the tailboard sessions, quick safety meetings, in the safety training, this is where you might be able to get a couple of sentences in instead of just a brief, little tidbit. You might be able to have a slightly larger bite, for example, in these types of meetings. But again, it's that safety message. It's using the safety pathway for adding in a couple of security ideas and concepts into this. And that's where, you've seen in all of these examples, you're using the things that they're comfortable with, you're using their day-to-day life, you're using all of those kind of standard mechanisms. You're not forcing them to because this is one thing they will take time to do. They will always take time to go to training for something new and something different. In a lot of cases, it may mean they get wider job capabilities, right? It might mean that they get a raise. It might mean they get to get additional increase in pay because they're now support person for somebody else, or maybe a new rotation in a shift. These kind of things are really important for them. So they actually will take time to sit in through safety training. And that's something that's really common for them. Most of it is that really, not only is the seriousness of their job not something to game around about, but they're used to basically monitoring everything all the time for problems. So taking time away to do something for them it's frustrating, and it makes them angry. This is something that they actually will do and they want to do. So you can prescribe action, but you can't prescribe attitude. In this case, the attitude's already there. So in these training sessions, they're usually, maybe 30 minutes, sometimes an hour, sometimes half a day. Tailor the message, time the message. Don't overload it with security, but add it in there and weave it into what you're doing with the rest of that safety training as well, and kind of make it fit within the context and construct of that safety, topic, for example. But then again, it can be the same content you've got in another way, just packaged up in that safety wrapper.
Right. Yeah. So when you're onboarding your people, you've got to give them all the introductory training for everything with the organization, ethics, and, operations and security, and then being able to try and revisit in with those different briefings. But the other aspect of it is, okay, so they're aware of it, but what makes them care? And that's always a big dilemma that has to be faced with regards to security awareness in general. And so safety supporting that as well, okay, I know I got to be safe, but who cares? Well, it costs lives, if you don't follow certain procedures. If you try and work against them, if you just constantly are just trying to stuff the material onto the employees, a lot of the times you're going to end up failing as well. And you want to make sure you work with them. And exactly what we've been touching upon today with, making it a part of making them feel like they're a part of the solution rather than just, a cog in the wheel. And, a lot of the times it comes down to employees will know about it, but if they know to do it, that goes a lot further in regards to your culture as well. They know that they've got to do this. Like we were just talking about with knowing to plug in, I can only plug into these locations just because I know it, but if I can do it, it drives it home a lot further as well.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we're going to wrap this up with some final thoughts here, and we'll talk about that one cool trick. The one cool trick is that safety, the idea of learning about safety and constantly focusing on safety is already in the culture in OT, and you can piggyback on that. You can use that channel to also deliver the message of cybersecurity awareness, which is now about safety too. That has been proven with cases around the world now. And you can deliver it in a way that they understand and are used to, which is in the safety briefings, which is in the safety training room, which is in the break room. Use posters and video. And I think the final thing to add to this is to know your audience. It is really important that we've talked about the mindset of OT folks. Obviously, it's a bit of a generalization. Everyone is different, but we're trying to give you ideas on how to be successful with your OT cybersecurity program. You really want to get to know the people, and there are many different ways of doing it. You need to know what are their specific cybersecurity issues. For example, downloading movies, plugging in thumb drives to watch movies, plugging in their phones, things like that. Be aware of those issues and deliver messages related to those. They also need to learn about phishing and ransomware and those kinds of things and how that impacts them. They need to know that, but they also need things that are specific for them. So how do you get to know your audience? There are all different kinds of ways. Patrick and James, what's your best recommendation for getting to know the OT folks in your organization?
It's actually pretty, it's the cost of a cup of coffee. I know when I was at the utility for many years, we would have security staff brought on, and we made them go out into the field and put on a hard hat and boots and actually spend some time in the field learning what goes on out there. And it was part of their job before they could actually really understand from the power company side. If you're bringing in, for example, an IT security person, they could be the sharpest, tool in the box. But if they don't understand the power system, for example, some of those components, they need to sit in the control center and actually watch how operations happen and feel some of the tension in certain windows. They need to go out to the plant and just get a feel for what day-to-day life is like. So it's going to take a little while of walking in their shoes, listening to them. It's that olive branch of taking down your ego and working on the other side. But I think part of it is also helping the OT side understand that IT stuff matters too. And the key for that is, I hate to bring up the tired example of the Ukraine, but in almost all cases, we've seen OT is affected through IT channels. Rarely does anybody directly attack OT. It starts typically on the IT side. So there's a bit of a bridge there in getting both sides to communicate and make friends and play nice in the sandbox. So understanding both sides if you're the security awareness person, you get to now learn both languages, the IT side and the OT side, because you got to speak both. So learning your audience is key, but understanding how both sides have to work together, I think, is crucial.
Yeah, and when you've got your security awareness program, and you're trying to implement it or figuring out what to get, when you think about the costs of getting that data breach or that downtime, if you can engage your employees to be able to make the right security decisions, that goes a long way. When you think of the hundreds of thousands of dollars that you would have to spend to recover, but if you could spend half of that or a third of that and have people that are engaged to come in and work with the various plant locations or the manufacturing floor, and get working with them, whether it's doing giveaways or it's, getting t-shirts. I mean, everybody's got enough t-shirts, but t-shirts or giveaways, chargers, something that's branded, something that they can feel that they belong with, and engaging in that culture, that's going to go a long way for keeping the employees engaged and making the right decision.
Yeah, shirts, hard hat stickers. Yeah, those are big things. Yeah. Yep.
Right. And I can imagine an ideal situation. Obviously, we all are very busy, but an ideal situation is when you could connect with someone in the OT area who is interested in cybersecurity, someone who has perhaps a passion of their own, connect with them and make them your point person in the OT area. Attend a safety briefing, attend a safety training, go to the break room, have some coffee in the break room, and talk about this is what we're looking at doing and what are some tips on how to do it. Ask the people, and anyone in any department, anywhere, I shouldn't say anyone, that's a bit of a blanket statement, but they like to be involved. Even if they don't have answers for you and they say, well, I don't really know, at least you asked them. And then when the message comes to them, they're like, yeah, okay, I was part of this. Maybe I didn't have an answer. Or if they do have an answer, you have valuable information on how to tailor your message and how to reach people. So definitely don't look at OT folks as some foreign area where you need a passport to get in and you don't speak their language. Look at them as participants in creating security awareness messages and techniques that work for them. So any questions? The first thing I'd like to say just really quickly is that the Archer News videos are free to use on the Archer News Network channel on YouTube, and many, many, many companies use them around the world. I don't know if I can name drop, but just imagine lots of big names in finance, in industry, in insurance, you name it, access and use these videos to show people talking about current events, actual things that are happening and how they relate to you and your job. Some of them are OT related, some of them are IT related, some of them are just dang funny. I use a lot of Lego stop action. So feel free to use those in any way you need in your business. So do we have any questions?
Don't see any. I don't see any. I think everybody got it clear as mud, or we hit them with so much information.
Yeah, we're also at time. Yeah.
Okay, well, then a quick question that I have for you guys is, do you know some examples, some unsuccessful examples of people trying to do OT cybersecurity awareness, things that didn't work? We always like to hear about that because that helps us know what not to do.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a failed example of someone trying to explain a bunch of encryption to operators because they thought their passion was crypto, and it was an IT security person, and basically made them all sit through a discussion on cryptography. And I got some of the most flaming hot comments from those operators about how their time was wasted, and this wasn't important for their job, and how this whole thing could have caused problems with the plant. And so, for example, they don't need to hear about Alice and Bob and how encryption works. They need to know not to plug things into their device, not to watch movies, not to click on phishing links in their email, that kind of stuff. And there's some fundamental differences in what your standard security professional thinks about on the IT side versus what the OT world is actually interested in or needs to know.
All right, well, it looks like it is time. So if you have any further questions, feel free to send any of us an email or a message or Twitter or however you want to do it. Are there any final thoughts that you guys would like to add?
No, this has been good. I've thoroughly enjoyed this.
Yeah, fantastic.
All
stuff.
right. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have
Thanks,
any
everyone.
questions, let us know.
Thanks for coming.